A special thanks to Catapult Sports, who provided us a coaches lounge to sit down and talk ball with coaches who were at the convention. And we caught up with Cody Alexander, who's become a regular guest on Coaching Coordinator. And we talked about the 2022 season, going back to some of the trends that we saw before. We recapped some of those, as well as taking a look at what is expected in 2023. So here's our episode with Cody Alexander of MatchQuarters.
We're at the AFCA and sitting down with Cody Alexander, MatchQuarters. We had him on the podcast the last time, right before the season, and we talked defensive trends. So now we have a chance to sit down in person. We've never done the podcast in person, though we've met before, but sit down in person and talk about how those all played out and what the season brought us, and maybe some new trends that you see in the game. So, and we'll start with just the high school level and looking at some of the things you saw at the high school level this season. How much of it stayed true to what we were predicting versus maybe some new things that have developed?
Yeah, I think the biggest trends have been, I think we're still seeing a movement to the 3-3-5 with a lot of high school teams, which makes sense. It's an obvious trend where we have a lot of tweeners at the high school level, and that's kind of a tweener defense. And so the answer to that has always been get bigger, right? That's what we saw that play out against TCU in the playoff. That's what Michigan tried to do as well. And I think that you're seeing more coaches go back to maybe wing T concepts, gap, kind of more of that power football concepts, relearning things from, a bygone era, even though it hasn't been that long, But it's funny how cyclical football is, especially at the lower levels of, especially at the high school level. It's what was hot last year, and it's what we're going to see. I just think you're going to see a lot more pin and pull. We saw a lot more pin and pull this year. A lot of people studied the butt concepts, more wing T concepts. How can we get bigger personnel usages? And I feel like at the high school level that meshes well with the evolution of more high school defenses running more of these hybrid schemes, especially like the odd stack.
Yeah, so obviously with the odd stack, you're taking advantage of athleticism. You're getting more of those hybrid type players on the field. But as we said, the trend offensively is bigger guys, right? We are seeing more 12, 21, 22, whatever it might be. So the thought is, then how do you take essentially what is a spread type defense and use it to defend the bigger personnel? What kinds of things do you think will come to the forefront and now in how the 3-3 may evolve to deal with bigger guys in the game?
Yeah, I think what you're seeing, especially at some of these higher levels, is in Iowa State started doing this a couple years ago. They put a really big Sam to the field, and they put a big linebacker out there, and that's kind of counterintuitive to what you would think, right? You don't want a big person out in space, but what it ends up doing is okay, well, we're not getting a tight end on a DB anymore. Now it's a tight end's going to have to go block this linebacker. Or now this little slot receiver, when they want to run a horizontal screen, is now going to have to go block a 225, 230-pound linebacker. And the way that system and a lot of these systems are done is that same linebacker's always attached to the box. He's a C-gap force player. So you're not, even if you go trips, he's not necessarily walking out over number 2 like you normally would in these split field concepts. So I think defensively what you're seeing is you're finding these teams say, what if we flipped the nickel and the boundary safety, and we now have a big nickel or a big linebacker out there, and now that nickel is now playing more what I call slice or inverted sky concepts to the boundary, where now he's coming down and being the force player to the by one, or we can use him to double him because he's really a coverage guy first anyway. And so seeing that trend, I think, especially at the college level, you're probably going to start seeing that more at the high school level, is people feeling a little bit more comfortable. Well, he's not really leaving the box, so we can kind of put a bigger guy there.
Right. Yeah, that takes me back to coaching high school ball. And actually, I coached defense then, so I do know some of it. But we had in our defense, that Sam linebacker, and our guys who played Sam linebacker were the tight ends, right? I mean, it just fit really well, and it was that concept. Of course, as things went to spread, it was thinking more about nickel personnel, and that guy changed, right? So it's still about personnel, right? It's still about how you're going to use the people that you have, and finding those guys, and those, the tight ends today, they're not like the tight ends pre-spread era where those guys were just tackles with an 8 or a 9 in front of the other digit, right? I mean, these are some athletic guys, some hybrid type guys as well, just bigger bodies.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things that you're seeing is a less emphasis on pressures. You're seeing pressure rates drop, especially at some of these. You go look at a lot of the schools that were in the playoffs, right? Their pressure, our percentage are going down, and I think the big reason for that is there's an emphasis on coverage and using coverage rotations instead of necessarily we're going to blitz, these guys and we're going to solve our problems through blitzing.
Right.
But now we're exposing ourselves. I think, look, it's going to happen this offseason. It happens every offseason. Coaches complain about 7-on-7 and things like that. And, is it real football? But one of the things that 7-on-7 has done is that it has actually made the passing game so much better, even at the lower levels. Quarterbacks and coordinators are now a lot of times on the same page of where there's an opening here, there's a seam here. When I get a blitz here, I want to throw into it. Now I kind of understanding where these things are. So how do you combat that? I think we're seeing a lot more, especially at the higher levels, a lot more either I'm going to show you something static and we're going to change post snap, or we're going to, I call it passive pressure. We're going to change the look post snap to pressure the quarterback in real time rather than blitzing and giving you a tell and you kind of having a hot route or something like that. I think we're seeing a lot more emphasis on that.
Right. Looking at the college level then, and obviously what happens at one level definitely then makes it to another level. Some of the trends you saw this year at the college level, and some of them I know are going to be similar to what we just talked about.
Yeah, much more uptick on 5-man pressures. I think you saw that and a lot of people went back and started looking at Georgia and was like, well, why are they having so much success outside of just having that defensive line?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, what schematically are you doing? And I always say this to people that discount Georgia and some of these other schools, like, oh, well, they have talent. But what you have going on at Georgia, for instance, is the epitome of having elite talent and elite coaching and elite teaching. And so you kind of have the scheme, the teaching of the scheme, and then the players to do it. And I think that 5-man pressure, what you're doing now is you're creating one-on-ones. And if everything is about pass rush, which is becoming more and more emphasis on that, is how can I get one-on-ones? And then changing that look post-snap. What are the pressures that we're using? A lot more internal pressures to collapse the pocket. That's what I'm seeing a lot more. And not necessarily fire zone 3. It's a lot of match concepts within that half-field zone concepts. I know the Saban system, they call them Big 12s. These half-field zone where we're playing man to the blitz side, we're playing zone away. Even within your fire zone principles, having some sort of a zone it and a match it side, or doing zone it or match it off of the actual formation. Being a lot more in tune with what's going on offensively. Yeah. On the defensive side, I think that's where defense is starting to catch up.
Yeah, well, and you bring up the internal pressure, and I really saw this a lot at the college and the NFL level this year, that those internal pressures are pretty important. NFL, you see it a ton. Their protection help, right? And being able to handle, a Myles Garrett off the edge or something like that, right? They're dedicating that help, making sure that they're not getting it from the edge. But I see in quarterback play so much more guys just getting good at stepping up into the pocket and having their space to throw there. So if you could get some good internal pressure, along with you're dedicating guys to protect the edge, but now there's stuff inside. It gives you some chance for success, and those guys just like to step right up into it and still maintain their status as a passer, right? Not get their eyes down and panic and run. they're still throwing the ball down the field, so it's important.
And I do think that by doing that as well, you are actually getting into more of, especially on early downs, you're using a pressure structure that's really good against the run, and then if you can get that internal pressure, now you're in the face of the quarterback, and he really doesn't have anywhere to go because you've got a two-layer system on the edge where you've got these cop contained pressures, and then your interior tackles, they're kind of just waiting around finding a hole, either making the defensive incorrect or kind of working back inside and making these layered pressures. And I think that's what you're seeing more and more is like the layering of fit structures, putting that into the coverage system. And these 5-man pressures are not your typical fire zone with the fire zone with 2 off the edge,
right,
with fire zone 3 behind. It's much more curated to what you're seeing, and that to me is the biggest trend that I've seen.
Yeah, just looking at that aspect of it too, some of the things I think you see a little bit. There's so much help outside as guys taking, especially in some packages, if they have more than one really good edge guy, third down, getting that guy inside now to give him a chance. The help's going to the edges. Now this guy's singled up, like you said, one-on-one on the interior.
I've seen it. I started talking about this a couple years ago. I call it boss front, and Big's on the same side. It's also known as like a load front or an overload, where you're getting all of your anchor points on one side, and you've got your speed edge, your jack linebacker, or whatever on the other side, but you're putting your interior guys all on one side and with the defensive end all on one side of the center, and then just using that to create one-on-ones or to create slide protection or slide lock or combo, however, and then mugging linebackers and using that to get that. And then on the other part of that, you're seeing a lot more width, forcing guards to play like tackles. I'm seeing that a lot more at the NFL level as well. I mean, that's been around for a while, but you're seeing more and more teams kind of show up in the same presentation because it does work, and there's a reason why a lot of teams are starting to do that.
Looking then purely at the NFL level, some of the things that you've seen here as the season finishes up and we head into the playoffs.
Yeah, a lot more coverage rotation post snap, and
that's what we talked about early.
Yes, and that's the thing. Yeah, you get the too high, and now you kind of have an understanding of moving, but now you're getting these teams that are starting to really dig into self-scouting, being like, okay, well, we've been in weeks 1 through 4, we've really shown this pressure out of a single high. Now we're turning that same pressure structure into a trap 2. Seeing a lot more of these single highs snapping into these trap 2 coverages, whether it's on fire zone or it's a simulated pressure, which I think that's a big thing. That was a big trend that I saw started being talked about a lot a couple years ago, and now you're starting to really see it. A lot of people have kind of jumped on that train of what we're finding out, and it goes with that kind of Fangio principle that you see is kind of taking it over. Whereas I love the fact, like I love a static presentation, like because no matter what, every time you put on film, every time you look out, it's the exact same. I have no idea. There's no tells, and then all hell breaks loose after the snap.
Right.
But you've got to be able to play that cat and mouse game. So beyond that, how can I set things up where we've only run this pressure from this look and it's always been a cover 1 pressure, and then all of a sudden we snap into trap 2. I thought Utah did a great job of this. This is at the college level, but I thought Utah did a great job. They're such single high dominant, but then they would sprinkle in these trap 2 pressures from a single high look, and then they'd sling out where safety's taking the big half, and then you've got an inverted 2 concept away from it. They did a great job of that. Georgia's always kind of been able to do things like that. I thought Illinois, Illinois' big thing is look, man, we're running cover 1, 5-man fronts, but then they would kind of, a lot like what Utah did, is that they would do that. And I think it's grown in the NFL. I've talked to a couple of people that cover the NFL, and they're seeing more and more of these show middle of the field close, and then move to some sort of a cover 2, whether it's the nickel taking the big half and slingshotting, or it's the safety rolling. I call it 2-roll.
Right.
But it's these concepts where you're showing these, and then you're either simulating pressure or 5-man pressures, and a lot of these 5-man pressures too, and I've been noticing this too, is hugging the back. it's technically not a 5-man pressure, but whoever your 3-dropper is, that's what I call it. Whoever's your 3-dropper or whoever's in charge of the back, they're just going to blitz the back.
Right.
And it's a numbers game, right? If I can keep the back end, then that means there's only 4 receivers out there. And so even if I am in a fire zone, now I still have the numbers. And if I don't, if in a regular drop 7, then I'm cooking with gas. Right?
Yeah.
I think that's been a big change.
For sure, and obviously back set matters with that. And we went through that period where it seems like just about everybody went to pistol to avoid that. I know that's how I made the transition to pistol, is because they were blitzing the back set. So do you think that's something you're going to see more pistol moving forward?
I actually don't, and the reason why I don't think so is, now pistol guys will argue with this, but I really think if you go and you talk to a lot of these coaches, one of the hesitation to going to pistol is protection. You lose that protection. It's much harder with a lot of these quick motions that you're seeing now, with like jet motions and things. How do you give the timing of the back deep is now the lead blocker on some of this stuff. How does that work? I think you might see, and we've gone through this, football's so cyclical. We've gone through the deal, the clap the hands, back goes up, real quick, and then the ball snap, having the back stay in pistol, go to left, go to right, depending on where the play call,
just
protection is instantly. But when you do that, you can't have 2 guys motion at the same time, so it becomes more difficult to do a lot of these horizontal motions that a lot of these teams are trying to do. I mean, that's what we're starting to see is these quick motions, especially because, speaking of trends, we're seeing a move back to the nickel going with the passing string. And I think we've talked about this maybe several years ago of the evolution of the nickel position. Of one time it's we go through these phases where it's the passing strength, and then it's I always want them to the field, and then it's like, man, we really need to go back to the passing strength, and then it's in that bouncing back and forth, and now we're seeing more to the passing strength. I've even done the same. My last stop at the high school level, that we went to the passing string. And that's something, if you've followed me at all, I've always talked about set the nickel to the field, protect the nickel, but, there's evolutions to the game. So how do you combat that? Quick motion. Now I want him to move. I want that nickel to move, because if he's moving, it's harder for him to fit in the box.
Yeah, definitely. I think, for me, pistol, thinking back to how we used it, we were 12, 21 a lot with that. Some 11. We wanted the downhill runs. It was more pro style. Definitely more like Michigan is doing, right? And they'll put the fullback in there right next to the quarterback. I mean, I like what it does from that standpoint rather than being in the eye, and I think there's things you can do. People say the shell isn't good, but go reverse out. It works. Did it, but I think you're right. I think that the advantages of being close to the ball for that guy, and again not having 2 men in motion, etc. Those are things you want to maintain. So that makes a lot of sense. In looking at, you're walking around here at AFCA, always all kinds of cool stuff here. You see the latest and greatest in all the unis. The biggest booths are always the helmet booths and the apparel booths. But there's a lot of great stuff around here, tools for coaches, and the technology really that seems to just be growing at a rapid pace. We saw that, right? COVID kind of changed everything in that regard. What are some of the things you see in terms of trends of using some of the tools that are here?
Well, I do think that there's a much bigger emphasis on analytics. I think there's, especially guys in my generation, I'm 37, I'm seeing a lot of guys my age kind of like dipping their toe in analytics. And I've talked about before just using simple efficiency, just simple efficiency data of just win rate data. Do you limit them on, 1st and 10? Did you let free or less? Second down, did you limit them to less than half the yardage to gain? Third down, did you stop them? Or 4th down, did you stop them? You being able to use some of those data, and there, some of these programs that there's some people that are coming out now that are analytically based, and they're starting to find, hey, what if we can market this to high school coaches, maybe small college coaches, that it's not necessarily built in, and some of these programs are already building it in. Like I know Huddle has their own efficiency built into their breakdown models. I know that I've talked about it's very easy to do from just downloading your play-by-play data and things like that. So to me, I think it's creating more of a more objective look at what I'm doing, and not necessarily having that at the end of the year, but having it in real time throughout the year.
Yeah, I think the real time is important because do that every off season. You didn't have time, and you didn't have the tools.
Hindsight's 20/20. And your team changes every year. And I think that's the biggest thing to me is a lot of times you get into hindsight, and your opponents are looking at the same film you are, so they're looking at the same numbers you are, especially if you're in a good district. So if you're in a competitive district and you've got smart coaches, they're looking at the same information you are. So everything is a year behind because you waited until the year. That's the thing I like is always, in Texas we have bye weeks. We have one bye week during the season or taking that time after 5 games of looking back and be like, okay, what are we doing that's working? What are we doing that's not working? Why is it working? Why is it not working? And I always look inward. I always wanted it to be my fault first before I blame the kids. Sometimes you just have kids that just can't do what you need them to do. But is it the way that we're teaching it? Is it the way that we're presenting it? I feel like we're becoming smarter coaches because of the limited time that we do now have from at every level. We're having less time, and so how can I maximize that? And a lot of these companies are trying to do that through analytics.
Yeah, for sure. I think that it's understanding what to do with it. I mean, when you think of analytics, everybody probably is, on the surface level, am I going for it on 4th down? But yes, we see that on TV all the time. Yes. See the guys with the books all the time. But yeah, it's what you said. It can really help you pinpoint. And again, using it real time. We got some problems in this particular scheme. Well, now you could dig into why and find out really quick. Is it something with technique that you need to teach better? Is it a technique maybe that your guys can't do, right? That you're asking them to do too much. So, ultimately, that serves the player, right? That's what this is about. And I think, a lot of innovative stuff here, and I do see that as something in the future for coaches, something you need to think about. Work into your workflow. It doesn't have to overtake your workflow or build everything. You don't have to be the guy who, builds everything on the analytics. I only do things on what the data does. Ultimately, you got your decisions that you have to make. Your feel for it, and feel for the people. Those are numbers. There's still people behind those numbers too, and it's going to help you though, coach those guys.
Yeah, and I think that it's just odd that analytics tends to be this dirty word because they think it's people that aren't connected to football telling me what I should and should do. But I mean, go look at what we're seeing right now. Passing numbers are up, early down passing's up. People are starting to understand that that's a much more efficient play than running the ball all the time. And look, high school coaches, I get it. They're going to tell you still got to run the ball at the high school level, and I agree, you still do. But there's better ways of doing things, better ways of teaching things, and I think that's where analytics can help you, and it can help you. I tell guys all the time, one of the biggest problems a lot of guys have is like with practice planning, and how do we do this? And to me, it's built in. Hey, we're good at this. Let's build on it instead of always constant. And I think too, always constantly focusing on the negative. If it ain't working, man, go move on from something else. Move off of it, and then especially if it's in the season, and then in the off season, take a critical eye on it and look at it. How are we teaching it? How are we implementing it? How are people taking advantage of the scheme that we were doing?
Yeah. Well, it definitely, allows you to make those decisions and move things forward in a smart way, right? There's definitely the tools available. So 2023 for you in MatchQuarters, what are things looking like? Tell us a little bit more about the things you're doing here in the new year.
Yeah, I'm trying to do more consulting with other people all around the country. Just keeping building the Substack, which is where a lot of my things are housed. Building the template shop that I've got. Getting feedback from coaches about what kind of things that they want, material that they want, what they use. Last off season, about a year, it'll be a year ago, I came out with my defensive workbook, which was things that I had kind of talked to defensive coordinators, successful ones at all levels, and what are you doing, what are things that you're doing, needing, and then being able to combine that in one thing. I just got done with my 6th book, The Hybrid 4-2-5. It's been a project I've been working on for about a year and a half, kind of putting things, because speaking of trends, going back to a 4 down, but not the 4-2-5 of old, like especially like the 4-2-5 that I came in at Baylor with, or like Narduzzi's been running forever, Gary Patterson 4-2-5, but like kind of a modern iteration of it, of being able to mix odd and even spacing. How do you do that? How do you apply, because I started noticing this a year ago, was like coaches were asking me, I really like these creepers, I really like these simulated pressures that I see in these odd fronts. How can I implement this in a 4 down without just making it in a 5-man dog? Because I already have those, so how can I mix that up?
Right.
How can I close the B gap in unique and different ways? And that's what you're seeing, I think, a lot of in the college level, and then it's been around in the NFL for a long time, just because your interior guys. But that, to me, I got done with that. So to me, it's just keeping on building that and creating more content for coaches and just growing it and trying to build the brand and
yeah. Well, the stuff you do definitely helps the profession. We appreciate all that you've been doing over the years and how this continues to grow for you. How can our listeners find that stuff that you just mentioned?
Yeah, so all my books are on Amazon. You can type in Cody Alexander, type in MatchQuarters, and you'll find that. All 6 of my books are on Amazon. You can go to MatchQuarters.com. It's kind of like a home base for everything. I've got links to everything from there. Obviously, MatchQuarters.substack.com. It's one of the top Substacks within the sport, all of sports on that platform. Anything other than I'm not on Facebook. I plan on getting on Facebook this spring, but I'm on TikTok as MatchQuarters, Instagram MatchQuarters. I'm on YouTube. Even started doing Reddit. And then on Twitter, I'm at @the_coach_A. So anything off of that, I'm MatchQuarters, and then on Twitter, I'm at the Coach A.
So just about everywhere.
Just about everywhere. I'm really trying. It's funny is that football has such a broad stroke. You've got young guys that are coming right out of high school, and that they're nerding out about football, and they want to be a football coach, and they're going to school to do that, or they're playing college ball. And then you've got coaches that are in their 20s, and they're GA, and then they're just starting out. And then you got guys at my age and then older. So like I'm just trying to get the content everywhere, wherever it is, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Those are kind of the big ones, on Facebook. So I'm gonna try and get on Facebook this spring. So it's coming. So just be patient.
Great. Well, I appreciate you taking some time here to sit down face to face and talk. It's nice to do with you, and certainly we'll have you back again sometime to talk about what's trending for the next season.
That's right. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you again to Catapult Sports for providing the space to talk with coaches. Check out all they're doing at catapultsports.com. Follow what we're doing at coachingcoordinator.com, and follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski.